It's an easy punch for me to throw because I'm not, if I were saying no one should go to school, then sure, that's a fist fight. But what I'm saying is I just think people should have choices. And like, that's actually really hard to fight with because most of us, when we get down to it, we don't want to be told what to do.
Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. And guys, we have our sights on someone special today. Only a mother could invest in this idea.
Made this like super artistic.
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually.
True startup story, guys. You got it. Your company just got seed round financed. Congratulations. You're going to the moon. But now you have to scale. You found great talent out in California, New York, Georgia, and even Eastern Europe. So what communications platform will you be using to ensure your international team is always aligned? Well, the answer is easy. Slack.com for Teams. We've used Slack for all of our previous startups, and they've supported us in tremendous ways. And we want to give them a thanks today for supporting vchunting.com. Did you also know that Slack is a great tool for personal use? Yeah, I use my own personal Slack channel to drop in documents, notes, to-dos, and follow-ups to ensure that my workflow throughout the day is right on course. I promise you, if you try out slack.com for personal use, you'll end up using it for your team as well. Go to slack.com to check it out. Welcome everybody to another episode of VC Hunting. Actually, this is our third season, and we're starting off with a wonderful guest today. It's Danielle Strachman, who is the GP and founder of 1517 Fund, and also on the original team that helped build the Teal Fellowship. Thanks so much, Danielle, for joining the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Peter. And thanks for finding me on Twitter.
Well, I did slide into those DMs in a very interestingly auspicious way. We'll get to that in a second, but let's go back in history, Danielle. Let's go back in history a little bit. On October 31st, 1517, so this is many, many, many moons ago, on October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses on the wall, on the church door, and he fundamentally changed the trajectory of religion, of history, of faith, split the church. I mean, he was an apostate. And so tell me, give me some context here. 1517 Fund, you're big into this story. So give us some context. How did this come about?
Yeah, so the name for us really harkens back to our days at the Teal Fellowship and working with Peter Thiel. We ran that program for 5 years, and the whole point of that program was to show that one path was not for all, and that sometimes starting something, you got to do it right now. You can't wait until you finish school. You can't wait until you're done with your first job or second job or 10 years in industry. And we grabbed our name in part because we've noticed that numbers are kind of hypnotic. If someone has a t-shirt or a sweatshirt on that has a number on it, people always ask, what's that? Right. If it just has words on it, people assume they know what it means. And so that was one reason we grabbed that name. But another is for the history lesson. My colleague, Michael, is really big into history. And I walked into the office when we were still at the Teal Foundation working together. We've shared an office for about 10 years. And he was writing 1517 all over this piece of paper, kind of like a madman. And I was like, how are you, dude? Like, what's going on? What's 1517? And he starts telling me about the history. He's like, Protestant Reformation. And I said, I must have skipped that day in history class. Tell me a little more. And so he was talking about Martin Luther nailing the theses to the church door, saying, hey, it's wrong for the church to sell a piece of paper to say that to get into the kingdom of heaven, you need to buy this expensive piece of paper. So we say likewise, in today's age, there's another big institution, higher ed, selling a very expensive piece of paper saying it's the only way to call yourself an educated person. And what we like to say is it was bullshit then, it was bullshit now. And so that's what we're about. So that's where our name comes from. And we wear it loud and proud.
I love the conviction and I love the kind of the context and how this narrative of yours kind of emerged. It really is, hey, we're putting a stick in the mud. We believe this it can be fundamentally different, and we might not be right, but we're going to blaze this trail and we're going to do it that way. I love that. I love that. Now, that actually makes a lot of sense, considering that you actually come from an education background, working with a charter school. So you've seen certainly the educational system within a charter school, and you've seen probably the opportunities to improve as well. And so did this make a lot of sense? Did it resonate with you that, hey, we're attacking maybe I'm bringing it up here, but we're attacking the educational system here at some level?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I used to be a private tutor, and I worked predominantly with homeschoolers, but I also worked with kids in public school and private school of all ages from 5 to 21 years old. And at the time, I thought the way that you change education is by going from like the inside out. And so my colleague and I started a charter school back in 2008 is when we opened, and we decided we'd give young people a different opportunity, and that's for K through 8. But when I came into the world of the Teal Fellowship and with 15, 17, my purview's changed a little different. I think incentives really matter. That's something that I learned working with Peter, is that incentives are everything. And you got to change the incentives at the top. And so I think K through 12 changes when college changes, when employers, don't need to look at where did you go to school for your degree. And if we can put a stake in the top, then I think everything else sort of falls apart in K through 12 after that and opens up a lot more opportunities. And our purview is not that school is inherently bad or something like that, but one type does not fit for all. And we just want more choice to be out there. And we want people to make conscious decisions about where they go to school, whether that's people enrolling their kids in preschool or all the way up through college, or maybe it's doing a boot camp or taking time off. Or we've seen many people who run the family business, and they're some of the brightest people because they've got generations of family that they're, leaning on and saying like, hey, like, we're leaving a legacy here. So yeah, that's what we're about, is really, putting that stake in at the top. We're not an ed tech fund. A lot of people will think like, oh, Danielle was in education for a long time. We do have this educational mission, but I am a very grumpy ed tech person, in part because I really think you have to attack the top. And I've seen the problem very up close and personal. So we back people who have either dropped out of college or never even stepped foot in university. We break that thesis very rarely. Once in a while, we say we'll break it in the name of science fiction. If someone is working on something crazy, like we've backed a quantum computing company, that team does have a PhD in there. But our teams are predominantly dropouts. And what we want to do is uphold what they're doing to really showcase for the world that this is a possibility for young people, and we need to stop infantilizing them.
Oh, wow, there's so much here that I want to unpack, Danielle. This is some great stuff. Well, I mean, I'll just start by pulling something from your website, which is a quote. It's that you said, extraordinary careers, right? Extraordinary careers are possible, right? Outside the tract universities, right? The tract institutions. And so you really are. And I actually wrote this down in my notes here. I said, does she have a chip on her shoulder about education? But I really appreciate actually your context here. It's not that you have a chip on your shoulder. It's that what you're really doing is almost a meta play of saying, hey, we want to educate the world that there are different ways of succeeding in life. It doesn't have to be part of the
be educated. Yes.
Be educated. And so I was like, oh, maybe she has a chip on her shoulder from higher education, but I don't think that's it. You really want to educate, and you want to really give people the opportunity to know that there's more than just the, as you said on your thesis, kind of the indentured servitude of, K through 12, which is a feeding mechanism for the university system at the top.
Yes. Exactly. And and I'm really glad you noticed that, Peter, because I think different types of school can be great for people. Like I did go to undergrad and it was perfect for me. Like at 18, I did not know what I wanted to do. There weren't as many opportunities for being able to build out something as fast. I was going on mostly scholarships, so the debt was very, very low. So I was able to start my tutoring company out of school because I wasn't saddled with debt. And that was the right choice for me. And I wouldn't want anyone to take away that choice for me, but I wouldn't want someone to look at, someone else. Like I have a cousin who's actually much, much younger than I am. There's this huge gap in my family in the cousins. And one of my cousins is going to be going to trade school. And my aunt was posting on Facebook the other day about, isn't this wonderful? that, you know, he can go to trade school, and it's no longer thought of as like, oh, trade school is for those kids who can't cut it. No, trade school is for those kids who want to go out and make money. Like,
Absolutely.
and it's no longer thought of as like, you know, this like dunce cap mechanism or something like that. And that's what I want to empower for more and more people.
I will say, not that I have any, you know, scientific facts around this, but I would say that
Sure.
that there still needs to be a lot of education around the value
Yep.
of trade school and going to a 2-year program
That's right.
instead of a
I
4-year
completely
program.
concur.
And maybe that has to do with the lack of communicating those from maybe people like us or the older
Yep.
generation. But
Yep.
you know, you can. Studies have clearly shown, I know that you've read them, studies have clearly shown that trade school in many ways is not only more fulfilling, but
Yep.
you get in the workplace and you get those extra
Yep.
couple of years of workplace experience,
Yep.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so
No, absolutely.
from my particular perspective, I didn't think that we were going to spar, but I'm in many ways on this very similar position as you in terms of worldview around education. I have 3 master's degrees, so I spent
Oh, wow.
a ton of time, and my
You
wife
schooled up.
has 3 too. So we had
got 6 in the whole family, man.
we had over $1 million worth of debt of student debt, and so we.
Oh my goodness.
What is fascinating, I don't want to spend time talking too much about this, but what's fascinating is because we went on the other extreme.
Yes.
I can speak with at least my own authority to say that education really, it's a great program. I think there are people that need to be in those walls, but you certainly don't need it to be successful.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well, no. And in addition, I really think the future of work and that whole concept of the future of work is going to change things a lot, where it's so, like, I tell people I was at the Teal Foundation for 5 years and they act like it's ancient history. They're like, oh my God, 5 years, so long. When someone's in a position for about 2 years, people are like, so what's next? What are you doing? And so what I think is going to happen with education in that realm is that you're going to see people go into boot camps like every few years, or take on courses, or it's not going to be, you need 4 solid years of something and then you're done learning. You know, there's I think there's this like thought about like lifelong learning, and people espouse this, but I actually think work is going to make lifelong learning really real, because that's, again, the incentives of like, to be great in the workforce, we have to be on the top of our game and on the edge of what is new. And that doesn't mean just like sitting and being stagnant and thinking the thing we learned about when we were in undergrad is the thing we're going to need in 10 more years.
It's certainly not going to be. It's certainly not going to be.
No.
So you had a quote there that on your website as well that said, "Real education is liberation." Can you expound on that a little bit? Obviously, there's some things that we could pull from what we previously talked about, but real education is liberation. Give us some more verbiage here.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, I will attribute that quote where the credit is due, which is Nietzsche.
Oh, that's right, it is Nietzsche.
And so I can't remember which book it comes out of. My colleague is a huge reader. And he did the translation on that one. But for us, what that quote means is that an education should liberate you. It should offer more opportunities for you. It should open doors that weren't previously there. It shouldn't saddle you with something, whether it's a path, whether it's debt, whether it's this notion of who you are as a human being. It should really be something that is freeing and opening, rather than oppressive.
I love that idea, and I would say that I would agree with that. Education should be something that opens up the mind, opens up opportunities, open up worlds that you never knew existed, because
absolutely,
you've never read this author before. And whereas education with a tracked path often can pigeonhole you into, let's be honest, you have colleagues, friends, aunts, uncles, whatever, that
everybody,
you know, that they're pretty dissatisfied with their 25-year job that they pigeonholed themselves into, and they felt like they couldn't get out of.
Did you know that there's even more value than just audio or video? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at VC Hunting, and make sure to sign up for the VC Hunting newsletter, where you'll be able to get weekly news on venture capital, startups, founder stories, and the occasional wisdom extracted from Peter's brain. Go to vchunting.com to sign up. And now, back to the episode.
Well, and the worst case that I see is, I've had a lot of friends who have gone to law school and then they go into the practice of law and they're saddled with a huge amount of debt from undergrad and law school. And then they figure out, gosh, I never really wanted to be a lawyer. And so I think there's this huge disconnect of the study of something versus the doing of something. And we need more programs. Like I'm always boasting about the University of Waterloo. They have an amazing co-op program where students study for about 4 months, and then they go into co-op for a couple of months, and then they go and study again, and then they go into co-op again. And so they can sort of be iterating on like, you know, I did a internship, you know, coding, and I found out that like actually sitting and doing code for 8 hours a day is not what I want to be doing. And maybe I want to do more design work, or maybe I want to work in a totally different field. So not only do they come out with a degree, but they come out with the visceral knowledge of what it's like to work in the workplace. I had the same experience. I thought I was going to be a clinical psychologist and researcher. And when I came out of school, I worked doing research, and my life was literally sitting in a closet. There were no windows, with 2 other people pushing NIH paperwork. And I was like, well, wow, this sucks. Like, yes, I'm glad we are trying to make lives better for ALS patients and pushing this paperwork, but I am not the woman for the job. Like, this is not for me. And I'm glad there are people out there who want to do that and have the conviction to be able to work on something that has a huge long feedback cycle of years to know whether or not that drug was helping or harming patients. But that's just not me. And I wish I had known that before I finished school.
That's a really unique story. I think it is very true. I think anyone that has entered into the corporate space, they generally wake up, especially if they've been hibernating for 4 years through college, that their first job is not what it was all cracked up to be. And certainly there's a lot of gaps in their assumptions around what would happen, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So let's talk about, I kind of got this from doing some research on know, everything that you're all about, but I want to dig a little bit deeper into the focus of your fund and the founders that you back. You gave us a little bit of context that these are the dropouts. Now, we don't look negatively on them. It's what it is. They're the dropouts. They're the ones that didn't go to school. What was on your heart when you decided very specifically that this was the type of entrepreneurs, these are the type of founders that you want to back?
So it was a number of things. One, it was working at the Teal Fellowship and building this huge community of young makers and entrepreneurs, and seeing this gap between what we were seeing in the program in terms of outcomes, working with people like Vitalik Buterin of Ethereum, working with Pritesh Agarwal of Oyo Rooms, Dylan Field of Figma, and then also seeing how hard it was sometimes to connect these people to capital or like the venture community in general. It's very hard to find people who, you know, will back, you know, I lovingly call it the DNA round at this point. Like, I think pre-seed is its own category and needs to be put in there. It's hard to find people who will do that space. It's hard to find people who will back you when you don't have the backing of an institution that they know and trust and potentially love. And so my colleague and I said, you know what, we could sort of like disintermediate that gap and become VCs ourselves. So one thing we always talk about is that we back people who have no business doing the businesses they do, and we fit in that category too. I don't have a degree in finance. I've never worked at a venture fund before. We have learned a ton in the last 5 years. Our joke that we have is that philosopher and teacher become VCs, and it's sort of this wily story. You know, but that's why we did it. But we love working with this population of people. For me in particular, I made a promise to myself in my early 20s that I was going to be really charting a different course for young people. And that was sort of like this mission statement that I had, was like all about choice. And I didn't know where it would lead. And at first it was working with homeschoolers, then it was starting my charter school, then it was working with the Teal Fellowship, and now it's the fund. And so that for me all fits in that ethos. So I always told myself, you know, I'll know if I'm not doing the right work if when I put my feet on the ground in the morning, you know, stepping out of bed, if I'm just like, ugh, I don't want to go do that thing. Like, one thing I love about my work is there's this higher mission calling, you know, to reshape what people think of as what it means to be an educated human. But I love that my work is very boots on the ground too, working with founders on the daily, helping with X, Y, and Z, and just, getting really gritty with people too. Like I need that. I can't just be in the cubicle, like being a thought leader or something like that. Like, that's not me.
Thought leader.
Yeah, I know. I hate the term. Like, Oh, just terrible. I can't even. I'm like, I want to see the do leaders. Like, like that's what I want to see. People who are out there doing it.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that conceit, and I can kind of tell that you're scrappy. You don't mind
Very.
you don't mind, not proverbial fist fights, but you don't mind throwing some punches around and saying, hey guys, come on, let's talk the
Well, and
real.
to me, it's like, it's an easy punch for me to throw, because I'm not, if I were saying no one should go to school, then sure, that's a fist fight. But what I'm saying is, I just think people should have choices. And like, that's actually really hard to fight with, because most of us, when we get down to it, we don't want to be told what to do. Now they might think, oh, well, my kid's going to go to school. I'm like, okay, cool. Your kid's going to go to school, but other people's kids might not.
Well, I truly believe that the experiences that you have shape your worldviews, and therefore you apply those worldviews to your kids. So I don't know if you have kids, but me and my wife, for example, have gone the extreme route of education, because Asian parents, that's all I have to say.
Right. Yep. It's
so
true.
For us, we're actually going to the other extreme, being, entrepreneur, being self-employed. My wife, it's just like, we know that you can learn at a trade school if you want to do that, but we also know, because we're big on project-based work with our kids. We're also like, hey, that's 90 days, do this.
Let's do it 90 days, now.
Try this. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
But you can't quit 3 weeks in. You committed to 90 days.
You got to commit. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it.
We always tell our daughter that you have to go 90 days to figure out how much you really despise it. And it'll also teach you what it takes to do something to completion. And so that's one of the lessons that she's 9 years old, but we're teaching her lessons.
Yeah.
Finish strong.
Yes.
Learn something through the process.
That's great. I love that. I mean, you're speaking a page out of Angela Duckworth's Grit Work. She's amazing. Yeah. Look up Angela Duckworth. She's an academic who researches grit as a character trait in people. There's also a great book called Peak.
I've heard of that one.
Peak. Peak is fantastic, and also talks about that, when you look at these elite athletes, musicians, and so on, it's, there is some talent that initially I think helps them sort of spark like, oh, I might be good at this, but it's really the hard work.
Exactly.
It's deliberate practice. It's blood, sweat, and tears. And that's what you're teaching your kids too in those 90 days of, I was a musician growing up, and I'm really glad I had that experience, because when you're honking away at the clarinet and you don't sound good, there's not a lot of motivation to keep going. But then when you start getting it, you're like, oh, okay, like I could be actually good at this.
And that's one of the things metaphors I've used for examples I've used for her is that I've asked her to watch other classical artists and I say, hey, how easy does it look like they're doing, how easy is it?
I know.
And my daughter was like, oh, he makes it look so easy. I'm like, because
that's the practice.
30 years doing it.
That's the muscle memory. Yeah.
And that's the mat. I tell her that true joy in your work is when you've mastered the craft. And so that artist sitting on that stage in New York City, the reason he's sitting there and enjoying everything is because he spent 30 years doing it.
No, that's exactly right. That's awesome. That is, all those lessons are so important.
So have you always been like philosopher inclined? Because let's go back. We do some research here at VC Hunting on October 13th.
I can tell y'all have done your homework.
Hey, I spent 2 hours of research.
Oh, look at that.
Hey, I got 3 master's degrees. All I know how to do is research.
You're a very good note taker.
I actually had to learn how to speak to people because I spent so much time, researching. But October 13th, 2012, you said, quote, "You need to be where you can do the most good." This is a quote from Temple Grandin of Singularity Summit.
Oh,
do you like to quote academics? Do you like to quote them a lot?
That's funny. I love Temple Grandin. Well, and it's funny too, because that harkens back. I used to work a lot with students who had autism. Right. And so Temple is huge in that world. I guess I like to quote people in general. Like people say good things and I'm like, oh, that's like good and thoughtful. And not just VCs, academics in particular, but yeah, I mean, I like to think about things in general. I would not, I like to think deeply about things. I wouldn't call myself a philosopher, philosophizer, or anything like that by any stretch. But
you did say that philosophers become VCs, right? So maybe this was the right.
Well, that's my colleague. That's Michael, because he's a PhD dropout, and he was going to become a philosophy professor. Yeah.
Aren't we so glad that you guys connected and you saved him from that lifetime of
I
drudgery?
know, that's right. Exactly.
Well, let's go back not too much farther than that. On September 20th,
Sure.
This is actually a question I'm really intrigued
Yeah.
about. On September 20th, 2015, so 5 years ago, on a blog post in response to a founder, and for everyone listening and watching, you can find that in the show notes below. But the blog post was called "Be Entrepreneurial Over Being a Founder." Now, I read the article, but not everyone out there has heard that. And I think it'd be great to unpack that for us. Why is it better to be entrepreneurial over being a founder?
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get at there is that being entrepreneurial can really look different ways in your life. You can be entrepreneurial and work for somebody else. It means you take initiative. It means you're inventive. It means you bring ideas to the table. It means you execute. And I think one of the things I was especially trying to get at in that post was that it's become entrepreneurship has become very popular. There's people who are like doing it. It's like instrapreneurship or something, like Instagram, like, oh, hey, I'm at a conference and I'm taking a photo with
That's a new word. I've never heard that before.
I just made it up.
That's pretty good.
But there's a lot of that, and it's in a way it can make entrepreneurship look very glamorous. I'm like, oh, it's fun. You get to travel and you set your own schedule and you get to take pictures with people. But like, for the people who are really good at it, it doesn't become like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, the work keeps getting harder over time, so it's not like it gets easier.
Ain't that the truth?
Like, the prestige and the money, let's talk about the prestige and the money, that comes when you've done something successful and you've worked your ass off and you've had like these dark nights of the soul and you didn't know if you were gonna make it. And
I love
it's like all of that. And so when people are like, oh, I have always wanted to be a founder, I'm like, for what? Like, what's your mission? Because a founder is to enact on a mission. They're not there to be like, oh, I take on a title. And in general, I think titles are really hard in the early stages of a team. I've advised a lot of young people on, when you're pitching someone in your team of 2 people, don't say that you're CEO and CTO. You grow into those roles. You don't become the CEO of a company or CTO of a company until you're managing whole teams. Like, I was just talking with a friend of mine about this right an hour before us at lunch, and I wasn't trying to be like derogatory, but I was like, yeah,
no, you're right.
Starting out, it's like summer camp. It's like, it's a small crew. You're all working together, and that's so important. It's so important. But like, you're not, and we were working with one of our, no, you haven't made it yet. And even I was so impressed. We were talking with one of our companies yesterday, the founders of Loom, that are doing extraordinarily well. They were just backed by Sequoia. And Vinay, one of the founders, was saying that he's really looking at how to grow into that CTO role in the company. And that, you know, he's gone from engineering to like VP of product and they're going to be building out their team quite substantially. And so he knows he needs to grow into that more and understand what the challenges that's ahead. And I was so humbled by that. I was like, wow, he really gets this. He really gets it. And that just, I was just so blown away by that level of insight. That he could see that like the journey is long. Like, it's not just the fun stuff. It's not just what it looks like on social. And that's what I mean about being entrepreneurial over a founder.
I love it. And the way that I summarized in my brain as I came out of reading this excellent blog post, by the way, was that on being entrepreneurial is a mindset, whereas being a founder is a position. And frankly, just as you well stated, I'm a 3-time founder. I would never wish on anyone to be a founder because, there's glory on being on stage in New York City, going back to that metaphor example.
It's like a
30 years, in 15 minutes, but
what
about 30 years of 20-hour days? You know, that sucked.
Right.
That sucked.
So one of our founders, he doesn't do it as much anymore, but he used to wear these t-shirts that said CEO and janitor, or like CEO and coffee maker. And it's like, that's so true. When I was the founder of my school and ran it with my colleague, Christine Kuglin, for the first 2 years, we were both school directors, the principals of the school, but we had no budget for janitors. And so her and I have scrubbed more toilets than anybody else because we weren't going to ask our staff to do that. Like, it's like, we're running the ship, so we're scrubbing the toilets. Like, it's what you got to do.
You should have taken a page from. So I grew up in Japan and Korea. So in Japan and Korea,
all the kids clean. Yes.
You should have been like, we're doing this like the Asians do it. Everyone's cleaning.
Yes, we did some of that, not the toilet scrubbing, no. So we always did the toilet scrubbing. But
you
had to do it. Oh man.
course.
Okay, maybe we got to change it up.
I almost feel like, and doesn't make any sense, I think, to most people. I almost feel like cleaning toilets as a young child in school, it makes you a better person.
No, it's humbling. It's like, okay.
You realize that here's the way I've told my kids, when they have to clean the toilets, it's like, you realize that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if they're Bill Gates or Kobe Bryant or any of the greats, they're all ending up right here.
No, it's true. It's true. I used to think the same thing when I first started working for Peter. That was intimidating. And I had to keep reminding myself, he puts his pants on, like he does it himself, like just like I do.
Yeah, he doesn't have a servant that puts his pants on for him. He's not that special.
Nope.
So I want to ask a question because I knew that you're a great communicator. We're going to have a great conversation, but I had to question this post on Medium from February 8th, 2015.
Okay.
And the title of it was called The Power of Connection. And you started the entire blog post with the words, growing up as a shy introvert.
Oh, yeah.
Growing up, do you remember this blog post now? Growing up as a shy introvert, I never expected that it's important to get myself out there and to network with other people. I think there's often a common misconception around introversion and extroversion. Because clearly, you don't seem introverted. But I can tell you that I'm probably a lot like you. I'm ridiculously introverted. So I know, and I've met lots of founders, I've worked with them who are great technically. They're maybe introverted like Vitalik Buterin, who you've worked with. And so how does someone who's introverted, who's also a founder entrepreneur, learn how to communicate better their ideas? I'm sure that you have some ideas here.
There were a couple things that I did growing up that really helped. And it's interesting that you bring that up because I just met up with a friend recently that knew me when I was 19 years old. And it's been quite a while since then. I just turned 40 and we saw each other and we haven't seen each other. It's like, woo, 40. By the way, here's the hack on turning 40 or any new decade. I've decided that when I get into the late part of the decade, I become the pre-part of the new one. So I've been in my pre-40s for about 2 years. And so when I hit 40, I was like, yeah, I've been here for years already. Like no problem. So,
I get it.
I like that one. But I met up with this friend of mine who knew me since I was 19. He's like, wow, you seem so different than he said, I remember you as a shy little girl. And I was like, yeah, and I was, and I still feel that way on the inside sometimes. But there were a few things that I did that I really stress to people. And it's really all about getting outside your comfort zone. And the thing is that you need to figure out what that is for yourself. Because I used to tell people, oh, everyone should do speech and debate. That was huge for me. I helped a friend political campaign. So that meant literally knocking on doors, getting signatures. And that was terrifying for me. But for some people, that would be a walk in the park. For some people, it's like they need to learn how to shut up. It's like, okay, so that person maybe needs to take a step back. So I think it's important when we're younger and as we're, I think we're always developing, thinking about what's your comfort zone and how do you get out of it a little bit more. And for me, that looked like taking on things like political campaigning, doing speech and debate, and putting myself out there. But I also think for me, when you have a mission and something that you're serving, it's much easier for me to get up on, I can talk to a room of 2,000 people now because I'm telling them about the lives of the people I work with. And that's more important to me than my shyness. So it's this interesting balance. And of course, when it's my own stuff, I'm totally great with it. Ask me to go to someone else's networking event and I'm like, oh, I don't want to. Not my jam.
Totally, I get it. And now here's a side question. How was it? I spent several years in the cryptocurrency space. I built several applications. One of them was venture funded. And obviously, I just had to ask this question. What was it like working with Vitalik Buterin? Because he seems to be pretty socially awkward.
Sure.
Do you have any stories?
And I got to say, a little bit, and I'll share a little bit, and then I got to wrap up because I have an investor standing outside my office being like, hey, are we starting our meeting? I'm like, oh, we got to pitch you. But working with Vitalik was great, actually. I think a lot of people who maybe appear sort of awkward, they're just really deep in their subject. And I always loved talking with Vitalik. Oh, this is funny. My colleague is like, turn around and wave. I'm like, see, there they are out there. But yeah, no, it's funny. I don't even think of him as awkward. Maybe I'm just surrounded by this type of person at this point. But no matter if we were talking about education, if we were talking about crypto, one of the attributes that we look for in the people we work with is ability to walk up and down in their work. And so we always tell people, like, explain something to me like I'm your grandma. Like, because if you can't move through the different levels, or if you are talking to an expert and that's not working for some reason, like, you've got to be able to work on different levels, especially if you're going to do sales with people. And so all of our interactions with Vitalik were great. Like, he, very thoughtful, very deep in his field. And yeah, so I don't have any like particularly awkward stories. I mean, people think Peter's awkward, but it's just that he's thoughtful. Like, he's actually thinking about the question you're asking him. So yes, there's long pauses, but it's because he's actually considering what you're saying.
I can appreciate that. I just have this image of my mind of Vitalik dancing on stage, which ended up being memed and thrown all over the internet. And so I don't have a full, complete picture of everything that he's at, everything about him. So I think did we lose you there?
No, thank you so much for having me today.
Yes. So thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Hey, good to talk. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye. True startup story time. Guys, as a founder, I'm often asked, what are my go-to tools and technology that I use as I begin a startup? Well, that's easy. One of them is Dropbox. Dropbox is the easiest way to ensure that all your files and documents are synced on all devices, whether it be mobile, your local desktop, or remote. We want to thank Dropbox for supporting vchunting.com, and make sure to get your 30-day trial free at dropbox.com/business. Well, wasn't that a fun conversation? It's a little too bad that we got cut off a little bit there at the end, but that's okay. Perfect timing, because she had to go pitch to, I guess, maybe get more money if she's pitching, or maybe she's being pitched. I forget what she said there. But man, what a great conversation with Danielle Strachman. Man, what a great conversation. I knew that we were going to have a great conversation because of her writing, because of the research I did on her, but I could tell that she's a woman of conviction. She's an individual with conviction. She's chosen her path, and she unashamedly, and we didn't get to talking about this, but she has unashamedly communicated that transparently to the world. And she did a blog post talking about her 95 thesis on October 17th, 2017, and what she called #the new 95, where she talked about her 95 thesis of why education needs to be better, why there needs to be changes, why there needs to be more opportunities, these types of things that we've talked about. And she came up with this. You check it out on our blog. 95 points. Really worth going through. It'll make you think. And then this is one of those things that really resonated with me, because as many of you guys know out there, I've done an entire video series, 50 videos. The title, 50 Things That You Didn't Learn in School. And so that was my opportunity after going through an undergrad and 3 master's degrees, 3 graduate degrees. My 50-part video series was my response in many ways. My response to the amount of education I had and all of the things that I didn't learn in education or in college or in university. And these are the things that really mattered. And so I really appreciated that she was able to communicate and write these down, these 95 things about education. It's really, really powerful. I highly recommend that you read it. But what I also loved about her is that she's chosen to represent, and this is just really cool, that Danielle has chosen to represent those individuals, those founders, those entrepreneurs who've dropped out of college, who decided not to go to college. And I would never be able to say, because of my context and my experience, whether there's one is better than the other. I think many people could probably, and I could forgive them for this, but they could assume that I'm anti-education. It's not that I'm anti-education. I'm big on education and self-learning and teaching yourself and growing yourself. But I come from a context of lots and lots of education, and it definitely isn't required. That's probably the best way of saying it, that tons and tons of education in a standard, typical college university setting is not required, especially in today's world. And so I really appreciated the fact that Danielle and her team are willing to focus on individuals who have decidedly not gone the traditional route, the non-college route. And so that's really powerful. I really think that's a unique market segment of founders, and I'm really excited for some of the successes that come out of that. What else here? What else? Obviously, she learned a lot from Peter Thiel and the fellowship. That's just really cool. She's part of the origin story of the Thiel Fellowship. I did diss on Vitalik Buterin. Danielle wouldn't know, but you guys remember. I'm still am deep in the crypto space, and it would have been great if she had any fun stories to tell about Vitalik, because we all know we love watching Vitalik dance around on stage, don't we? So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This was really fun for me to tape and do. And frankly, we just ended way too soon. I think Danielle and I could talk for at least another half hour about some fun things. So I'm hoping I can invite Danielle back on again. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to find the field notes, feel free to go to vchunting.com/Danielle Strachman. Guys, this has been great. We are now in the third season, new season, guys, a season of VC Hunting. I can't wait for the guests that are coming up next. We'll see you guys next time.